Level 1, the wreck. You don't choose to become a castaway. Nobody fills out a form. Nobody raises a hand. The ocean makes the decision for you, and it makes it in about 40 seconds. You are a passenger on a mid-sized cargo vessel crossing a stretch of open water that has no business being as wide as it is. You are not a sailor. You work in logistics. You coordinate shipping manifests and invoice reconciliation. You have been on the water exactly twice in your adult life, both times on ferries that crossed calm harbors in under an hour. This is your third time. The storm builds for 6 hours before it arrives. The crew knows it is coming. The captain adjusts course. The first mate double-checks the lashings on the deck cargo. Nobody tells the passengers anything beyond the suggestion to remain in their cabins. You comply. You sit on the edge of a narrow bunk and listen to the hull groan and flex in ways that a hull should not audibly groan and flex. Then the wave hits. Not a wave in the recreational sense. A wall of moving water 12 meters high traveling at a speed that makes the concept of bracing yourself functionally irrelevant. The ship rolls. You leave the bunk without intending to. The ceiling becomes the floor and then the ceiling again in under 2 seconds. Something breaks against the back of your skull. The world goes a particular shade of nothing. You surface with no memory of reaching the water. Your lungs do the work your conscious mind has not yet resumed. You breathe, choke, breathe again. The ship is 40 meters away and listing at an angle that tells you it is not going to be 40 meters away for much longer. You see one other person in the water, and then between swells you don't. The waves are 4 meters high and the horizon between them is a wall of dark water in every direction. You find a wooden pallet with 2 empty fuel containers lashed to it by a twist of polypropylene rope. It holds your weight. Barely. You pull yourself over it and hold on with both arms and both knees and you stop thinking about anything except staying on the pallet. The storm continues for another 4 hours. You know this only because when it stops, the light has changed and your fingers have been clenched for so long that uncurling them produces a sensation somewhere between pain and structural failure. When the water calms enough to lift your head and look, there is nothing in any direction that indicates the existence of human civilization. There is only water, a lightning sky, and somewhere downwind, the faint dark line of what might be a coast. You paddle toward it with your hands. It takes most of the day. Level 2, the first shore. You drag yourself onto a beach of coarse gray sand and stay face down on it for somewhere between 10 minutes and an hour. The sand smells of salt and something organic and slightly wrong. You don't move until your breathing has returned to a rate that feels sustainable. You are alive. That is the complete inventory of your achievements at this moment. You have no food. You have no fresh water. You have the clothes you were wearing during the wreck, which are a pair of synthetic blend trousers and a long-sleeve shirt that has torn through at both elbows. You have one shoe. You find the second one on the beach 50 meters from where you landed. You have a waterproof watch that survived the wreck and tells you it is mid-afternoon. You have a wedding ring, which is the only object on your person with any personal value whatsoever and zero practical application. The first mistake most people make on a shore like this is movement. They pace. They walk the waterline looking for signs of rescue, burning calories they cannot replace, drinking seawater they shouldn't, moving away from the most visible position they could occupy. You know almost none of this yet. You make the mistake. You walk the beach for 2 hours before the thirst becomes the primary signal in your nervous system and you understand that if you don't find fresh water before dark, the scale of your problem expands considerably. You find it by sound. A thin trickle running out from under a rock shelf at the base of a low cliff where the beach meets the treeline. You drink from it with both hands and then you stop yourself, which is harder than it sounds, because every tissue in your body is petitioning for more. You drink slowly. You keep it down. You drink again. That night you sleep on the sand above the tide line with your back against a driftwood log. The temperature drops to something manageable but unpleasant. You do not sleep so much as achieve a shallow unconsciousness interrupted every 20 minutes by sounds from the tree line that could be wind, could be animals, could be whatever the island decides to offer you that first night. You survive until morning. This will be the metric by which all progress is measured from now forward. Level 3, the first week. By day 3 you have a fire. Getting there takes most of those 3 days. You understand the theory of fire starting the way most people understand it: friction, dry material, oxygen. The reality has a longer list of requirements. The wood has to be the right type, dried to the right moisture content, shaped to the right dimensions. The notch in the fireboard has to be cut at the precise angle that allows the friction to produce an ember rather than hot powder. The tinder bundle has to be prepared correctly and the ember has to be transferred to it at the right moment and blown with the right rhythm at the right distance from your face. If any one of these variables is wrong, You produce smoke and a pile of ash and another hour of nothing. On the second afternoon, you find a piece of curved metal on the beach, wreckage debris, with a section of the edge still polished enough to focus sunlight. The sun cooperates for exactly 34 minutes before the cloud cover resumes. You get your fire in that window. You sustain it through the night by feeding it steadily and sleeping in 2-hour intervals. Food takes longer to solve than fire. The island has coconut palms in the interior, which addresses some of the caloric problem but introduces digestive issues that take your body several days to adjust to. The beach has shellfish in the rock pools at low tide. You eat them raw for the first 2 days, which is not ideal but is survivable. Once the fire is reliable, you cook them. The difference in how your stomach responds is significant. You are losing weight visibly by day 5. Your belt needs a new hole. Your hands look different, thinner across the back, tendons more prominent. The work of survival burns more than foraging replaces, at least initially. You are always calculating, measuring each effort against its return, resting when rest is available, moving efficiently when it isn't. By day 7 you have a shelter, a lean-to of cut palm fronds over a driftwood frame, positioned above the tide line with the back to the prevailing wind. It is not waterproof in a serious rain. You know this and you know you need to address it, and you file it in the list of things behind water, fire, and food that require your attention. The list is not shortening. Level 4, the second month. You stopped counting individual days somewhere in the 3rd week. You count now in rough periods, morning and afternoon, good days and difficult ones. The watch still works and you consult it for practical reasons, but the date display is something you check less and less. You have built what you would call a camp, if you were describing it to someone else. There is a main shelter, substantially improved from the first lean-to, with a raised sleeping platform of split bamboo that keeps you off the damp ground and away from the insects that inhabit it. There is a fire pit with a windbreak of stones on 3 sides. There is a cache of dried fish on a rack above a low smoky fire of green wood, flies kept off by the smoke, the fish curing slowly into something that will keep for days rather than hours. You have made tools. A knife of sorts, a piece of the same wreckage debris that gave you your fire-starting reflector, ground against rough stone for hours until one edge holds a useful angle. A fish trap of woven green cane strips in a funnel shape, placed in a tidal channel and checked each morning. A container from the cut base of a large coconut shell, sealed at the seams with resin from a tree you identified through methodical testing on small cuts of your skin before consuming any of it. You think about rescue every day. You maintain a signal fire on the high point of the beach, a pile of green material ready to add to a base fire the moment you hear aircraft or see a vessel on the horizon. You have seen 2 vessels in 7 weeks. Both were container ships on the distant horizon, well past visual range for spotting a person on a beach without the kind of optical equipment that container ship crews do not use while transiting open water. The signal fire produced smoke. The ships continued their course. You have had one moment of what you would describe as psychological difficulty, which is the most accurate way to characterize it. On the 31st day, sitting on a rock eating cold smoked fish in the rain, you experienced approximately 45 minutes of a complete and non-functional certainty that none of this was going to resolve in your favor. Not despair exactly. Something more structural than that. An accounting. You sat with it. It passed. You went back to work. Level 5, the long haul. 3 months in, you stop looking for rescue the way you looked for it in the first weeks. This is not giving up. It is a recalibration. In the first weeks, every hour not spent on survival was spent scanning the horizon, listening for engines, placing elaborate hope in the likelihood of a maritime search pattern reaching this particular strip of coastline. That kind of attention is exhausting in a way that has nothing to do with physical effort. It runs a continuous drain on the part of your cognition that needs to be available for the immediate and the practical. You cannot afford to keep that account perpetually overdrawn. What you do instead is build. You build with the assumption that you will be here for a long time, not because you have abandoned the possibility of leaving, but because building for duration produces better results than building for tonight. The shelter becomes a structure with real walls of woven material over a bamboo frame, caulked with mud and dried vegetation fiber. It sheds rain. When you lie inside it during a storm, the floor stays dry. This is a significant achievement and you register it as one. You have expanded your food sources. There are fruit trees in the interior, 2 species you identified cautiously over weeks of incremental testing. There are birds in the canopy that can be taken with a simple snare of twisted plant fiber. There are freshwater crayfish in the stream above the cliff. Your diet is still narrow by any reasonable standard, but it is consistent enough that the weight loss has stabilized. You are thinner than you have ever been as an adult, and also stronger than you have been in years, in the functional sense, meaning capable of sustained physical work without the kind of fatigue that desk work and sedentary transit had installed in you over the preceding decade. Your hands have changed completely. The skin of your palms is a different texture now, thicker and less sensitive in ways that make fine work harder but sustained grip work easier. You have calluses on your feet that compress over sharp coral without pain. Your eyes have adjusted to reading the water and the sky in ways you could not have described to your former self. You think about your family differently than you did in the first month. In the first month, thinking about them was almost purely emotional, sharp and reflexive, the kind of thoughts that produce no output except the feeling itself. Now you think about them with more precision. You reconstruct conversations in full. You remember specific meals, specific afternoons. The recall is detailed in a way that suggests your brain is indexing differently than it did when you had other data competing for storage. You are not sure what to do with this. You treat it as a resource. The memories are company. Level 6, Island Mastery. You are 8 months in. You know this island the way you know your own hands. You have walked every kilometer of coastline. You have mapped the interior to a rough accuracy in charcoal on a flat piece of bark, trail intersections marked, water sources noted, the one area of unstable terrain above the southern cliff marked with a symbol that means do not go there in the rain. You have identified 37 edible species by systematic testing over the months. You have identified 12 that will make you ill and 3 that will do something considerably worse than that. You have 2 sets of shelter now. The main camp on the leeward beach where the stream meets the sand is where you sleep and store your supplies. 400 meters into the interior, near the highest point of the island, there is a secondary position, smaller, fitted with a cached supply of dried food and a sealed container of fresh water. You built it after a storm surge in month 5 pushed water to within 30 meters of your main camp. You built it without thinking of it as an emergency measure. You built it because it was the correct thing to have. You are manufacturing rope from plant fiber in quantities that have uses beyond immediate need. You have a small raft of bamboo poles that you use to access the reef shelf at low tide, tied together with this rope, equipped with a pole anchor and a fishing line of twisted fiber that you retwist every week to maintain its tensile strength. The raft is not seaworthy in any meaningful sense. It does not need to be. It extends your fishing range by 200 meters, which is the difference between the species available in the shallow lagoon and the larger species that move along the reef edge. Something has happened to your relationship with time that you cannot fully articulate. The days are very long in terms of activity and very short in terms of their passing. You are occupied from first light to after dark, always something to maintain, something to improve, something to prepare for. But the weeks disappear in a way that has no relationship to how weeks passed when you had a calendar, a meeting schedule, a commute. Time has become weather. It arrives, it does what it does, it passes. You have not spoken aloud to another person in 8 months. You speak to yourself occasionally, functional narration, noting what you are doing as you do it, a habit that formed without intention somewhere in month 2. You do not find this troubling. You find it useful. Level 7, the difficult season. Month 11. The rainy season is different from what you prepared for. You prepared for rain. You did not prepare for 6 weeks of near-continuous rain that raises the stream by 2 meters, saturates every piece of stored fuel on the island, collapses your fish-drying rack under 3 days of accumulated weight, and introduces a mold into your shelter that you spend 2 full days clearing before it reaches your food cache. You prepared for difficulty. You did not prepare for difficulty on this particular axis. Your fire goes out twice. Getting it back is harder than it was in week 1 because the tinder is wet, the reflector tool is corroded past usefulness, and your friction fire technique, while competent, requires dry materials that the island is temporarily not offering. The second time the fire goes out you spend 4 hours attempting to restart it before accepting that this is not today's solution. You eat your protein cold and wet for 3 days until a morning of direct sun gives you a 2-hour window that you use with full concentration. You have an injury in month 12. A slip on a wet rock shelf during a tidal foraging run. The fall is minor by most standards, a controlled stumble that ends on one knee rather than a full collapse, but the knee lands on the edge of a submerged rock and the cut is deep enough to require attention. You have a limited medical resource, a small amount of tree resin with antiseptic properties, confirmed through 8 months of observational evidence. You clean the wound with fresh water, apply the resin, and construct a bandage from a section of the cleanest cloth remaining from your original clothing. You stay off the leg for 2 days. The wound closes without infection. Lying in your shelter during those 2 days, unable to work, you have the most sustained and uninterrupted engagement with your own thoughts that you have experienced since the wreck. You review decisions. Some of them were correct and some of them were wrong, and the ones that were wrong are identifiable only in retrospect, which is the only place they were ever going to become identifiable. You do not find this review distressing. You find it useful in the way that maintenance is useful. You are identifying where patterns before they become structural failures. Your body is in a state that has no civilian equivalent. You weigh perhaps 15 kilograms less than you did on the day of the wreck. Your muscle distribution has entirely reorganized around the specific demands of the work. You have no back problems, which you had chronically before the wreck, because you spend no time seated at a desk or in a vehicle. Your vision has changed in ways you cannot measure but can observe. You track movement at the edge of your visual field with an efficiency that surprises you when you notice it happening. Your hands can do things that hands are not ordinarily called upon to do. Level 8, Rescue.
Month 14.
A fishing vessel from a different country than your own crosses the eastern approach to the island before dawn. You see its lights at 3 in the morning because you wake at 3 in the morning now, regularly, to check the camp and feed the fire. The lights are low on the water and moving slowly in a direction that will pass within visual range of your beach in approximately 40 minutes. You have the signal fire prepared. You have maintained it prepared since the first week. You move to it at a pace that is fast without being reckless, because a turned ankle in the dark at this particular moment would be a proportionally catastrophic outcome. The fire takes the green material and produces a column of white smoke before the sun is fully up. You add wet palm fronds on top of the base to thicken it. You stand next to the fire and wave a length of bright synthetic material salvaged from the original wreckage debris, bleached to near white by 14 months of sun and salt air. The vessel does not immediately change course. For 11 minutes it continues on its original heading. You add more material to the fire. The smoke column is substantial. Then the vessel turns. The crew who reach you in a small inflatable tender are 4 men who speak a language that shares no vocabulary with yours. The communication that happens on that beach happens entirely without language. One of them puts a jacket around your shoulders. You sit in the tender on the way to the vessel and look back at the island and the smoke still rising from your signal fire, and you feel something that is not what you expected to feel, which is nothing in particular, a blankness, the way a held breath releases. On the vessel they give you fresh water and cooked food. The food is simple and you eat it slowly because you know that your digestive system will need time to adjust back to what it is not currently prepared for. One of the crew, the youngest, watches you eat with an expression that you will later recognize as the look people direct at things they don't have a framework for. You eat everything they put in front of you. You ask for more water. They give you more water. The vessel is bound for a port 4 days' sail from the island. You sleep for most of those 4 days. Level 9, the return. Coming back is not what you prepared for. You prepared for the island. You did not prepare for coming back. The hospital is in a port city. The staff are competent and thorough. They address the physical inventory, the weight deficit, the healed but improperly aligned knee scar, the vitamin deficiencies that show up in the bloodwork, the hearing that has been affected in the left ear by sustained exposure to wind and surf in a way that audiology will address over the following months. They clear you physically in 4 days. The physical part is the part they know how to measure. Your family arrives on the 2nd day. Your spouse. Your children. The reunion happens in a hospital corridor, and it is not the reunion you reconstructed in your imagination during 14 months on an island. It is smaller than that and more accurate than that. Your youngest child holds your hand for 2 hours without speaking. Your spouse asks questions you cannot fully answer yet. The answers exist, but they require a vocabulary you are still locating. You return home 3 weeks after the rescue. Your house is exactly as you left it. Your desk is where your desk was. Your coat is on the hook by the door where you hung it the morning you departed for the voyage that ended on the beach. The house smells like the house. These are facts that require active processing in a way they did not require before. You go to the kitchen and open the refrigerator and stand in front of it for approximately 4 minutes. The available options are overwhelming in a way that a refrigerator full of options has never previously been overwhelming. You close the refrigerator and make yourself a glass of water and sit at the kitchen table. Sleep does not resume a normal pattern for months. You wake at 3 in the morning and lie in the dark and listen to the particular silence of a suburban house, which is not actually silence but is the near-complete absence of the specific sounds you listened to for 14 months. Wind through dense canopy. Water over stone. The particular acoustic quality of a beach at the edge of night. Your brain keeps scanning for threats that are not present. It takes time to update this setting. You see a therapist. She is experienced and direct and does not pretend that the standard frameworks for readjustment apply cleanly to your situation, which you appreciate. You talk about the island in ways you did not expect to talk about it. Not the fear or the isolation, which are the aspects people ask about, but the clarity. The way the problem set was bounded. The way every hour had a legible purpose. The way the metrics of success were simple and immediate and honest. Level 10, the after. You are back 18 months now. Your weight has returned to something close to what it was, though the distribution is different and seems to want to remain different. The knee scar has faded to a pale line that you can find if you look for it. The hearing in the left ear has partially recovered. Your hands have softened slightly. The deepest calluses have reduced to ridges. When you run your thumb across your palm now, it is still not what it was before the wreck, but it is heading in that direction. You return to work 8 months after coming home. Your employer held your position, a fact you registered with genuine surprise, because you had, at some point in the island's 13th month, conducted a full mental accounting of what was likely to be intact upon return and had not included that item in the expected assets. You sat in your chair and opened the laptop and read the accumulated messages and understood that the 18 months you were gone had been processed and managed and absorbed by the department, and that you were now a complexity to be reintegrated. You complied. You reintegrated. People ask you about the island with a regularity that has not decreased as much as you expected. Colleagues, neighbors, the parents of your children's schoolmates at functions you attend, because functions are part of what return means. They ask with genuine curiosity and sometimes with a specific hunger, a wanting to know if it was like the version of it they have constructed in their imagination. You answer carefully. You tell them about the fire, because the fire is a story with a clean shape. You tell them about the fish trap, because the mechanics are satisfying to describe. You tell them less about the nights and the injury and the psychological accounting on day 31, not because those things are private exactly, but because they require a longer explanation than the social context usually offers. Your children notice things you did not expect them to notice. Your oldest, at 14, observes that you don't complain about food. You register this as a correct observation. Your youngest, now 9, asks once if you were scared on the island. You tell her yes, at the beginning. She asks if you stopped being scared. You tell her you got busy, and being busy replaced being scared with something more functional. She nods as if this makes sense to her, which is possibly the most accurate reception that answer has received from any audience. You keep the watch. The one that survived the wreck and kept accurate time through 14 months of salt water and hard use. It sits on the nightstand. It no longer tells you things you need to know in the way it did then, but you keep it because it is one of approximately 4 objects that made the complete passage with you and back. You visited the island on a research vessel 8 months after your return. A marine biologist on the vessel was documenting the reef system of the archipelago, and your account of the island's location, triangulated against maritime records and your own memory of the current patterns, was accurate enough to navigate there. You stood on the beach for 2 hours. Your main shelter had partially collapsed in a storm, but the bones of the bamboo frame were intact and the secondary position in the interior was entirely undisturbed. The fish trap was still in the channel. Your charcoal map on bark had survived under the sleeping platform, damp but legible. You did not take any of it. You left it where it was. Standing on that beach in clean clothes with a vessel waiting offshore, you understood something the island had been trying to communicate in a language you weren't yet fluent in while you were living it. The skills were not the point. The fire and the trap and the shelter and the rope and the dried fish were the visible portion. The invisible portion was the recalibration of what constitutes a problem, what constitutes enough. Most of what you spent the decade before the wreck treating as problems were not problems. Most of what you treated as sufficient was more than enough by any honest measure. You cannot transfer this understanding to anyone who hasn't earned it the same way you earned it, and you know this. You tried, in the early months of return, to explain it in terms that might be useful. It did not work. The gap between the description and the experience is not something better phrasing will close. Somewhere right now there is a container vessel crossing an expanse of open water. There are passengers in their cabins. There is weather building on the horizon that the crew is monitoring and the passengers are not yet aware of. The sea does not distribute its decisions evenly or according to readiness. Someone on that vessel may not reach the other side the way they planned to reach it. If they reach ashore instead, here is what they will learn: water before food, fire before shelter in most climates, shelter before strategy. Rest is not weakness. The longest problems are solved in the smallest increments. The body is more capable than the mind will initially agree to believe. They will sit on a porch someday, or its equivalent, watching something ordinary with the particular attention of a person who knows what ordinary cost. The sunrise will be the same sunrise it always was. They will be a different person looking at it.